Now in this demo, we're going to talk about aggregation with Excel tables. And the way we're going to do aggregation is with an awesome formula function called SumProduct. Now you're probably thinking, what is SumProduct? Is that what an Excel developer puts in his hair? Hopefully the editors will add in a rim shot on that one. SumProduct allows us to do function-wise aggregation. It's somewhat similar to COUNTIF or SUMIF. In fact, you can in some instances replicate SUMIF and COUNTIF instead of using. You can in fact replicate some. You can replicate some product features sometimes with SUMIF and COUNTIF, but not always. And we're going to use an example here in which you can't. So you'll really get to see its value. Now the cool thing about SumProduct is that you're actually already sort of doing the work manually with Excel tables. We just don't really think of it. So let's just think through a problem, and then I'll show you how it works with SumProduct. So let's say I wanted to know the total tornadoes here. So we have 741 through 260, and I could try, based off of the dynamic that I created, I could make these 0 again and put a conditional formatting on them to make them go away, and then I could sum it up if I wanted to know the total tornadoes between 1972 and 1951. That's one way to do it. It's not a very good way. Another way is we could do it in the backend database. So here's one way we could do it in the backend. We have these filtered years, true and false. What I could do is I could write total tornadoes filtered like so, and then I can do this dynamic where I can multiply this value here, years filtered, by the total tornadoes. I'll hit enter here. We see that it brought all of them up, and then on my dashboard example, I could say something like sum data total tornadoes filtered, and that would give me the sum total of all the tornadoes within this filtered range. Okay, it's all right. There's a few things with it. Let's say I wanted to get quarter 1 or quarter 2 or quarter 3. Let's say I wanted to get the range just January through April. It gets a little harder to do that. And setting up the filters to do that, based off of how our table is developed, would get really tough using Booleans, 1s, and 0s. So there are ways around this, and that way around it is SumProduct. But before we start doing that, I want to show you that SumProduct actually does the same thing that we just did. And here's how we're going to set it up. I'm going to type in SumProduct, and whenever I use SumProduct, if I have a lot of items I'm going to put in it, I like to stretch this out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do open parenthesis. I'll type in data, and year is the one we want to test. So I've typed in data year. I'm going to say greater than or equal to the dashboard.begin year. So what we're going to do is test if that year range is greater than or equal to. So this is actually very similar to what we did on the table. Now we have a few choices here. We can do a comma, or we can do a multiplication. Multiplication is correct if we think in terms of linear algebra, the dot product. Perhaps the comma is more correct for you. It's just saying test this and test this next one we're doing. Personally, I like using the multiplication symbol, but it really is up to you. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say equals data, or multiply open parenthesis data to get our backend database. I'll type in the year right here, and I'm going to say less than or equal to dashboard.end year. Okay, and so what that's going to do is it's going to go through this whole data year list, and it's going to test if dashboard begin year is greater than it, and it's going to do it one by one. So in the first one, it's going to test if that year is greater than or equal to the begin year. It's going to return a true or a 1 or 0 there. And then it's going to do the same thing for the end year. And when it does the dot product, it's going to multiply it across. And we're going to actually be able to see that a little bit when we evaluate the formula. So finally, once I've tested for the beginning and the ending of the year, I'm going to do an open parenthesis here. And the thing I want to return is total tornadoes. So what I'll do is I'll type in data total tornadoes like this. And then I'm going to close it. And you see it came up with the same thing, 17,492. And it's always good to test it. Now you're probably thinking, how did this work? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to formulas, and I'm going to click Evaluate Formula. And we'll just step through this. So it always gets a little hard to evaluate in this little window box, but I think it'd be useful here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to click Evaluate, and you see that what it did, Excel took that whole range from 1950 to 1994, and it filled it in. And now, when I hit Evaluate, you see it's going to test with this whole range is greater than 1951. Greater than or equal to 1951, I should say. So I'll hit Evaluate. So you see it has false, true, 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 true. And now it's going to do that to the next item. So if I keep hitting Evaluate, you see it underlined data year. It's going to pull all of it back up. It's going to test if it's less than or equal to the end year. So here's what we have. We have two sets of trues and falses. And then what Excel is going to do is keep evaluating. So it multiplied the trues and the falses together, and what it came up with was a list of zeros and ones and ones and ones and then zeros. Now, if you're looking at this and you looked at our back-end database, you'd see the same thing. So it's basically the same operation. In that case, we were doing it on the table. In this case, we're letting Excel do it in the back end, and we're doing it with SumProduct. Now, I'm going to hit Evaluate next. It's going to take this list of total tornadoes, and then where it says 0, it'll multiply 201 by 0, so that's going to return a 0. Where it says 1, it'll multiply 260 by a 1, and so forth. And it's hard to really see one for one, but you get the gist of what's going on. So I'll hit Evaluate. I'm going to hit it one more time, and now you see SumProduct is going to take the sum. It's already taken the product. That's what we were doing by multiplying. So now it's going to take the sum of everything that's left over, so zeros and values. So again, if you're looking at this, you'll notice that this actually looks exactly like the filter that we have set up on the table. So I'll hit Evaluate, and there you go. Okay, so that's pretty neat, pretty nifty. What I like about SumProduct is I can hit Alt-Enter here, and I'll hit 1, 2, 3. I like to kind of do some indentations, 1, 2, 3. Actually, let's make it 4. I think that's what the style guides say to use anyways, 4. Okay, so what we see here is that we have two conditions, and then we have what I would call the return value. So the two conditions usually have something in it, like greater than or equal to, or just equal to. And then you have the return value, which doesn't have any condition on it, because just like in SumIf or COUNTIF, it's the value, the range of the value you want to return. So you're not doing any conditions. The other items are conditioned. The other thing that you can see here is that actually it's kind of similar to a COUNTIF or a SumIf. And maybe for you, you'll look at it and say, I'd rather use those. Well, there are certain things you can't use COUNTIF and SumIf for. So I'm going to hit Enter here. We'll get rid of these. I'm going to type in Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. So what I want to show you here is if you wanted to divide these up into different quarters of the year, in this case we're dealing with tornadoes, but we may be dealing with transactions, we may be dealing with, who knows, there's any sorts of data. So I'm going to set up this table over here as I'm doing. I bold, we'll make it underline. So if I wanted to get the totals for Q1, I couldn't do that with COUNTIF very easily. And the reason is that I would need to get January, February, and March. I would need to sum those up. So I'd have to write a COUNTIF for every single one. And I don't want to do that because COUNTIFs, or SumIfs I should say, I'd have to do a SumIf for each one if I wanted to get the sum for the quarters, January, for quarter 1, which is made up of the months January, February, and March. I'd have to write one for January, for February, and for March. And that's because the SumIf only allows you to put one vector range. It doesn't allow you to say from January to March. Now with tables and SumProduct, actually, we are able to do that. So let's do it right now. I'm going to type in SumProduct, open parenthesis. Now, I want to get the values of the table from January through March, and this is going to be my return value. So I'm going to show you can do this in a little bit of a different order. Before I put the conditions, and then I ended it with the return value. Personally, I like to do the return value first, and then I add my conditions. So I'll do SumProduct, open parenthesis. I'm going to say data here, and I want to start it at January, like this. Now, what if I wanted to go to March? So I don't need to actually write multiple multiple conditions, what I can do here is I can simply put in a colon, and I can treat this like any other formula. So I can say data January through data March, like so. And then, because that's my return value, it doesn't have any condition on it, I'm going to hit multiply here. Now we're going to add our conditions. So in this case, it's going to be year, or data year, greater than or equal to the dashboard begin year. And then we'll do once more data year less than or equal to dashboard end year. And I like to keep it nice and clean. So look how easy that was. Now, I can't do that with a SUMIF. I'd have to write multiple SUMIFs, and it would be annoying, and it wouldn't be as easy to follow along. What I see here is that I have my return value, and then I have my two conditions. And sometimes if I want to make sure my conditions stick out, what I'll do is I'll put them on the same line, like this. And this helps me remember which is my return value and which are my conditional values. So I've hit enter here. I'm going to take this, drag it down. Now we see that all of these are wrong, but fear not, we can manipulate these easily and fix them. So what we're going to do is put in April here, April, May, June. So we'll replace this with a June. And luckily the IntelliSense pops up to help us remember. So we'll start with July, August, September. Enter, and then October through December. And that's how you use SumProduct. And when you stop to think about it, nothing we did here was actually terribly complex. It is somewhat complex, but all of it is just things that we've done manually, or we're letting Excel do it behind the scenes. But it all follows the same principles. We use Booleans to filter, select, and aggregate. And in this way, all our data is living. So if I make changes to the data on the back end, it's going to automatically be reflected on this dashboard. And furthermore, as I change these values here, it's going to automatically update. So I don't have to change the values and hit an update button. It all is living, and it all works very quickly. And even that, on top of that, we even have a slight amount of Excel error checking involved, because if I make a 1950 here, it just shows nothing. And you can actually add a lot more if you want to say maybe a pop-up comes up, or something highlights up here that says that there's an error. And you can do that just by checking whether these are impossible ranges to have. And all of that can be done without VBA and with formulas. So isn't that cool?